and let my kids watch.
Go ahead and call the
Recording
meeting
in
to order.
progress.
And start with a roll call. McKee, here. Bottoма? Here. Behrenkamp?
Here.
Schultz? Not here. He will be here shortly. Nichols? Here. Don't know why I jumped. All right, we'll go on to the Pledge of Allegiance if everyone would stand and join me. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Agenda approval.
Perfect, thank you, Mayor and Council. Staff is proposing a change to the council of, with Councilor.
Change to the council? You got, that's an
Council
electable
agenda. I
position.
apologize, the agenda this
Got a
evening.
coup going on.
With Councilor Schultz out is what I was trying to get at, sorry about that. That we move number 9A in front of planning business to allow for those items that need a 4/5 vote. So we'd be looking at moving Trailhaven bridge replacement in front of 8 planning business. And then also on the dais are a few items for council. We did get claims out with the new software. So there is a copy of financial claims. There's a revised 8A, the resolution and easement agreement with some comments from the city attorney. There's a revised resolution 2022-03 for Tavera, making a note to the outlot on the private drives. And then there are 2 other items. There are some large-scale documents of the Trailhaven, diagrams of Trailhaven, as well as an updated zoning priorities survey. So those are the few additional items at the dais, and then the one change to how we'd like to proceed with the
Sounds
agenda.
good. Is there anything from council on the agenda? Okay, then I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda as modified, moving 9 unfinished business ahead of planning business.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, commission representatives, we have Jim Shulock and Tom Anderson from Planning and Parks and Trails respectively, hopefully online? Possibly online? And then we have open forum.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Anyone, we have not received any public comment cards, so if anyone is in the audience and would like to speak on open forum, you can approach the podium and give your name and address for the record. Otherwise, anyone joining us virtually can press *9 if you're joining us via phone. Otherwise, you can press reactions and raise your hand. Mayor, at this time, no one is currently raising their hand.
Okay. Then we'll move right on to, let's see, we don't have any presentations. Consent agenda consisting of items 7A through 7F. Do we have someone or? No. Does anyone want to pull anything?
Yes.
Okay.
7E.
7 what?
E.
Gotcha, 7E, sounds good. Anything else? All right, I'll entertain a motion to approve consent agenda items 7A through D and F.
I so move.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, item 7E, Dean, you wanted to pull that? Do you want-
Yeah, I just,
Yeah.
anytime we seem to, or anytime we get a donation from any group, how large or how small, I really want to make sure we take just a minute and thank that group, other than just a consent agenda. So thank you very much to the Sports Star Photography for the donation of that $664.44 for Parks and Recs. I know we had a big one a couple of meetings ago. That was nice.
Yeah.
Every little bit counts, and I think I wanted to just make sure we publicly thank them also.
Yeah, I appreciate you doing that. Definitely, I think, for all of us, thank you. We really do appreciate it. Anything else on it?
I'll just add to that, that I know Jess Seeby has said that a little goes a heck of a long way in parks programming. So this will buy a lot of baseball bats and gloves and equip a lot of kids. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay. I will entertain a motion to approve consent agenda item 7E.
So moved, please.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, then we're jumping to 9, unfinished business, Trailhaven Bridge replacement. We move it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I've got Kevin and Kent here to go through that.
Mr. Mayor, before we start, that is just for public consumption, is this the bridge?
No, we're going to the bridge, sorry.
Oh, okay. That bridge impacts three landowners, and I'm one of them. And so, I don't feel compelled to abstain from the discussion
Yeah.
but if the body wants me to abstain from discussion on this since it impacts me, I'd be glad to.
Gotcha. I personally don't have a problem with you participating in the vote and discussion. The council.
I have no issues.
I'm sure you'll keep the interests of the city at heart, throughout the discussion regardless.
This one's a pretty easy one, so,
Yeah.
okay.
Good deal.
Fair enough.
All right, I'll toss it to you, Kevin.
Sure, Mayor and Council, I'll turn it over to Kent Torby, the city engineer, to walk through the process, and we're here to answer any questions.
Good evening. In the fall, we did a feasibility study for 3, Trailhaven, Shuddy, and Kane. And out of that came the plan to move forward with Trailhaven first and Shuddy in 2023. So we're going to use 3 sources of funds for this. We have State Aid Road Fund, we have Bridge Bond Fund, and then the city will chip in some also. Next slide, please. For the public's knowledge, we replaced Shannon Lane back in '09. I serve as the bridge administrator for the state project on that one, and then the county does our inspections. So in the big picture, we've had a dry few years, or year and a half, and this time during inspections, as they got below the typical water line, they saw that Trailhaven was in rough shape. And it's an arch culvert, metal culvert, but really the strength is in the arch, and the bottom is separated from the arch. So they moved it down to a 5-ton. They have a consultant that does special inspections and said, come back out in 6 weeks, look at it again, see if it's moving. And they re-inspected, and it remains there. And MnDOT, talking with them, they won't close until a 3-ton. So there's a little bit of room there, but not much. And then talking with the inspector out of Duluth, they'll come back out in the freeze-thaw cycle and take a look at it again. Next slide. So we looked at 3 options, and 1A and 1B are similar. And state aid has typical standards, but they also have a modified standard that they call a comfort design. So 1A and 1B are the same road design. Option 2 is the standard state aid with
Save this.
all the typical requirements of side slopes and vertical curves or improving the sag curve. And then option 3, we looked at, what if we forego all the money and just put back what's there? Next slide, please. So really, the comfort design would keep the dip as it is. There's a drawing on your dais and in the public packet. It would raise the road a foot. But we do need a street light because it doesn't meet their sight distance. So you need a light down at the low point or near the low point. And guardrails, because we don't have the side slopes that are standard side slopes. Option 2 is standard. Just everything is built according to the state aids. You get rid of guardrails, you get rid of the street light. I should go back up to comfort design. The 1A, 1B are the same design. And during design, we talked with the state about, can we apply for a variance?
to get rid of the street light. So that's 1A and 1B. No change, except we ask for relief on the street light. Next slide, please. And this is the drawing you have on the dais and shows the vertical difference in the center lines. Next slide. So these are the construction impacts of the two options. Green would be the comfort, and that's why we looked at it, less property impacts. Yellow is the spot for the street light. And then we go to full-blown state aid or full state aid, and you can see where it carries through farther to the west and east, and then farther to the south. The north end is about the same. It is the same. Next slide, please. So when we look at costs, 1A and 1B are the comfort, and the city's into it for about 80,000. We have to provide some of the extras. If we go to full state standards, option 2, which is where engineering is at on a recommendation, then we're down to 20-some thousand dollars because it all meets state standards, therefore it's all fully, let's say, reimbursable. You'll notice under bridge, the culvert gets longer as you flatten out slopes. So the bridge bond then pays 110 instead of 68. So, and under the city, we would be paying the full 285, so staff is not recommending that be considered. So we're really asking, consider between the typical standard state aid, highlighted in yellow, or the comfort design, and we went to state aid, and then they said, you're not gonna get a variance, you need a street light. Next slide, please. Here's a little bit of a side-by-side. Simplifies it. And again, we're down from 80,000 under modified comfort to 20-some thousand for full state standard. Next slide, please. So we're recommending on option 2, then we begin the property acquisition. Once council directs us, we'll finalize design, then we can finalize our flood modeling. Culvert gets longer, it tweaks the answer a little bit, but we're not into final flood modeling yet. Option 2, we'll have a little bit more wetlands to look at as it extends out a little farther, and we'll be going through the standard permitting process. Now, the bridge folks do need full design. They know we're coming. We have some, I won't call it priority, but they know about the condition down at 5 ton. So at that point, once we get it fully designed, we'll be formally in the bridge system. Next slide. So we just asked, or Kevin asked that this slide be put up for resident feedback, and I'll let him discuss that.
Sure, Mayor and Council, we knew it was a priority of yours to understand what the adjacent landowners' preliminary feedback might be on these options, and we were able to meet with all three as of tonight's meeting, and run through this at a high level, very similar conversation that we're having with you tonight. And I would describe the feedback as indifferent on the options. I think all the residents understood that it was something that we had to do, that it was a major drainage way. I think they appreciated being reached out to. I think the overall consensus was indifferent to leaning towards option 2, primarily because they felt, and this is my words, not theirs, that that potentially that light was just as much of an impact as the side slopes, and potentially worse long term, but that was just a sense I got. So I would say both options are on the table with them, supportive of option 2.
I heard that there was one resident that wanted the road to just end there and just put 2 cul-de-sacs.
There was some other alternatives discussed that did not make the packet, but if you want to open that up tonight, we can have a conversation. And then I will just add one other piece of where staff feels that option 2 has some benefit is with meeting the clear zone and the state aid designs, the culverts extended out further. So at some point in the future, if we expanded that road or we paved that road or a trail was added, like they're planned on our collector roads, we wouldn't have to go back and pay to extend that culvert. So it kind of hits a couple stones there if we're in there once. So that and the lower local cost we feel is a good justification along with support of adjacent residents.
Okay. The next slide said discussion, so we'll turn it back to the
Easy enough.
council.
All right, thanks, guys. Any questions? Is there anything that you wanted to touch base on before you were here? Is there anything you missed or?
Oh, the only question I'd have before I came is, I'm assuming the agenda got rearranged?
Yes, yep. We moved 9 ahead of our unfinished business ahead of all the planning business.
Oh, okay, so we're basically right after consent agenda
Yep.
now?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you for that.
Yeah, no problem.
I think it's important for the public's edification, that about, I don't know, 3 times this, or 4 or 5 times this year, in the last couple of years, they've had the collapse on the culvert is very distinguishable. Like, you'll drive down the road and cars will hit it going too fast, and it's pretty comical because it's kind of like a speed bump. People going under the speed limit don't really have a problem, but, so it's not like, it is needed really bad. It's not, you don't have to be an engineer if you drove down the road to figure out that culvert is collapsing because the road like dips there all the time.
Gotcha.
I have 2 questions. First one, what would the expected life of a concrete culvert be? So if we replace this, is this a 100-year solution, 50-year solution, 20-year solution?
40 or 50 is a fair guess, but there's, like you say, concrete out there from a long time ago.
Okay, very good. And I know we've talked in the past, just touched on the topic, that the state has revised, or is in the process of revising, expected stormwater levels. Is this being designed to what we expect the future requirement to be, or the past requirement?
So I'll try to summarize it. So there's a floodplain elevation out there. I think it's a 920 or 24. So our modelers, and it's FEMA process, when you know more information, you correct it. So once we plugged in the information, it went to a 25. So we're using the FEMA numbers now that are current, which were raised with NOAA, or Atlas 14, which
Excellent.
came through NOAA. So it's an acronym, alphabet soup, and I'm sorry, but we corrected the model, we're using the most recent, and once the design is finalized, we'll go back into the agencies, and they'll review our stuff.
Very good. Thank you, Ken.
You have one?
No, that's it.
Oh,
Thank you. I had a question. So option 2, the cost does not include easement access, correct?
There's some in there, but we just don't know the exact number, and we try to show some in the total cost, but typically we don't show it an exact number because we don't know on every project and every
Right.
parcel. So there's some in there.
But it's a small permanent easement that we're talking about, and
Yeah.
a slightly larger temporary easement during construction.
And easements are eligible costs for state aid.
Okay. And what was option 2 made of again?
Option 2 is generally, in order to use the state aid money, we're meeting the state aid road design standards. So it raises the road
Yeah.
3 feet from existing roughly, and that results in, to appropriate side slopes. So basically
Right, but the actual, is it an actual bridge or is it actual?
They're both box culverts.
Oh, they're both
So it's just a
concrete box
shorter, yeah,
culverts.
Box culvert, and then it
Okay.
gets longer in option 2 to meet the side slope clear zone requirement.
Okay.
yeah, like you saw, one of the printouts was kind of the
Yeah, the design.
red is 2 and green is 1.
Yeah, for me, I mean, the numbers speak to the answer.
Yeah. I agree. Any other thoughts on where we're leaning?
I would propose two also. I think our general principle is to plan for the long term, and avoiding the need to redo this if the road has to widen makes sense. It's also the lowest cost and the safest, so I don't see, in the absence of resident feedback, and thank you to staff for reaching out and making sure that there wasn't a major red flag there. I agree with Alan, it's a pretty easy decision, I think.
Timeline, when would we do this, and how long will it take?
I think the goal will be midsummer, a little bit of variable with the permitting, but the goal will be to get it replaced as soon as we can, so.
Okay.
We had shovel-ready, quote-unquote, for approval to date, and so we're at 90%-ish, and so we gotta close that 10%, get locked in, finish the permits, bid the project, and then, execute, so. We're hopeful that it makes it through the spring and we don't have to close the road, and then we replace it and it all works out. So,
Closure would be north and south.
yeah, it would be closed during construction. We'd make.
More than enough signage to try to get people to stop going down there and turn around in John's driveway, but
Yeah, I think there'd actually be a detour plan required for state aid, a minimal detour plan.
that's even better. Thank you. I don't want to inconvenience the neighbors on this.
And there'll be a lot of outreach with school buses and garages.
Yep.
Hopefully the actual construction's minimized, they get, if the weather's good and the water levels are low, they can get in there out there pretty quick.
Yeah.
If all of a sudden we get to a spot where it rains a lot, and that's when they targeted to do it, it could extend out a little bit, but we just have to deal with that and build those contingencies into our plan and contracts.
And then we do it, or
We would-
we
I'm sorry.
send it out for a bid to do it, or is it cities doing that?
Our city engineer consultants would bid it out.
Okay.
And it would be a general contractor that would do this work.
Okay.
But we run that contract and just collect the money from the state.
Thank you. Any other concerns from the neighborhood? No assessments to anybody except the one to the north and east?
Except for that.
Just to defer some of the city costs?
No assessments, just voluntary.
All right.
Just just donations.
Voluntary assessment.
Oh, man.
Does
Thanks.
staff need a motion, or?
Yeah, I would like,
Yeah.
yes, thank you. We would like a motion to move forward with option 2, and that also includes authorizing us to start in the appraisal process and execute those, at least those agreements that we bring back to you for final approval. And then just to note, the proposal in here is the last 10% of the design, and then also, we just got pre-authorization on the construction, and we'd manage that and wouldn't authorize that if we didn't move forward with the project.
Gotcha. Someone want to make that motion?
I move to proceed with option 2 and allow staff to begin detailed planning.
Second.
And does that include the associated appraisals? Good. Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Alrighty.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we are back to planning business 8. Give me 1 second to get back to the right page.
Didn't I say that?
Oh, I didn't know.
Oh. No, I asked if I needed to, and I didn't have to.
Let's see. Okay. 8A, which is the, well, first we have a public comment opportunity for 8A, B, and C. Then we'll go into 8A, which is Kane Road, right-of-way vacation.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We do have one public comment in person, and anyone joining us virtually, if you do want to comment, you can press *9 or raise your hand. But at this time, we have Mark Lancherman here to discuss item 8B.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Mark Lancherman. I reside at 6936 Oak Ridge Road. I am a member of the Corcoran Planning Commission, but I am here today to make my comments on the record as a resident. The urban conservation issue was brought to the Planning Commission on January 6, 2022. The Planning Commission voted to recommend denial. In our deliberations, I voiced my concerns about the proposal, and I will reiterate those concerns now. Historically, large residential developments have been approved as PUDs. Our PUD standard affords the city council discretion to provide flexibility from our city's code. Flexibility is really just another way to say disregarding portions of the city code. To a developer, such as smaller lot sizes or setbacks, in exchange for benefits that are framed as being for the city by the developer. The proposal that is on the agenda takes away that discretion from this governing body. Instead, the proposal codifies permanently a flexibility/benefit line. It essentially says, developers, if you leave X% of land undeveloped open space, you can have smaller lots, smaller setbacks by right. I think this is a bad idea. The council should retain its ability to weigh and to analyze these requests. I think it's the council's job, and I think it's what our citizens expect. It would be a mistake to bind the city and all future city councils to this into perpetuity. I know that at least one of you ran on promises to, and I quote from your website, listen to resident needs and do not overbuild beyond their desires. I think that this proposal hinders altogether the ability of the council to listen to residents on this issue, and instead simply punts the responsibility and careful consideration these issues deserve to an operation of law. I would urge you to deny. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Anyone
Mayor,
else?
at this time, no one else is raising their hand virtually.
Okay, and we will go into 8A.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm filling in for Natalie today, who couldn't be here, for discussion on the Kane Road right-of-way vacation. So this was something that was brought to council in August. It was discussed and voted upon, but there was the motion failed. Since that meeting, the two property owners in question, or it related to this, the property owner who would be obtaining the vacated portion of Kane Road, and Mr. Brolin, whose property is over here, who has access. They have come up with a private easement agreement that ensures continued access to the property in event that the right-of-way is vacated. And Mr. Galbraith requested this item be reconsidered by council. So really, we're here tonight to ask for us to reconsider that right-of-way vacation. This is what the new lot would look like with the road vacated. And here's the existing access as it is today. So the private road, or private easement agreement does allow for some access. I'd note that it doesn't guarantee, because we don't have a driveway permit application in front of us, it doesn't guarantee the approval of a driveway at this location, but it does guarantee access.
Gotcha.
So with that, we just ask that council consider approving Resolution 2209, which approves that vacation.
Perfect, thank you.
And I would note that on the dais, there was a few minor changes from City Attorney Thames related to the vacation. So if you have any specific questions, we can talk to that, but he just made some minor tweaks to ensure that that was ready
Perfect.
for this evening.
Thank you. Any questions from council? You've all seen it before, I think.
I do have a question. Is it common for a government body to sort of codify a private agreement in this way where we're gonna, like, I get the easement of the road part, but I don't really understand and also the city, what's the city's business in having the agreement between two private parties be part of our, I guess, what, part of our discussion? Like, why does the city care if those two have some private agreement that that road can go over the, if I have if my neighbor and I decide that we're gonna have, that he can just, I don't know, he's got 10 feet of my property that they can go on, and we just decide that, what is the city's involvement here?
I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but so when this came up before and it didn't get it needed the 4/5 to pass.
Yeah.
And then the applicant came back basically with this
Yes.
proposed, with
Yes,
this
there
included
was-
in
There was
doing
some
these.
discussion at the meeting when it was brought forward that it would be helpful to have it codify, an agreement between them codified to just outline access is granted in terms of, is it necessary? I'm not, that's a great question, but I think in terms of when it was last brought to council, that's how the private agreement really came forward.
Yeah, so last time, I was okay with just the easement and not getting involved with the two private property owners, and I still have that position. So this doesn't change anything in my mind about anything that we already voted on. Am I accurate, and is something new here, other than the two private parties have come to an agreement on?
So because we only had four individuals here, we did not have a 4/5 majority, so the motion failed. So that is why it's being brought back in front of you. It's just, it was not, in order to vacate the street right-of-way, we're required as a charter city to have a 4/5 vote.
Yes.
If I may, I think your point is more of, I think that there was people that didn't want to vote on it because of, I understand what you're saying, and I agree with you. I didn't want to get involved with regards to a private party easement on a road vacation. Now that they have the easement, which I think is what hung up some people on council.
Yep.
I think to your point, and I would have the same point, is why does it need to be listed in the resolution as item 3? Can it be stricken from it?
Sure. Let me see here.
Because there's a legal document, there's a document signed and registered for the easement that's probably registered with the county, right?
It will need to be included with the county and recorded with the county is what we've,
The easement.
the easement, yes,
But the resolution doesn't need the easement attached as a supplement.
That's a great question. Kendra, do you know off the top of your head?
I don't think that legally you would have to do that. I think with the failure for this to pass last time and the reason given for denial was to direct them to work together, they have worked together. I don't think it puts us in any liability. It was closely written with the city attorney, so while I think you certainly could strike it and still approve the vacation request, leaving it in there, I don't think commits the city to anything or has any involvement from the city in that private agreement. Our city attorney has reviewed that in detail and feels comfortable as directed. And I think that was, I wasn't involved, but my understanding is that was worked through with Natalie and the two affected property owners with the city attorney, so the downside.
In the language, it says, it approves the request subject to the following conditions. So we're making a approval request subject to a private agreement between two parties. And I don't want that to be part of any resolution of
Well, it's
vacation
actually,
of right-of-way.
it's not actually approving that agreement, so that's a whereas, but there's nothing in the findings except to say that in number 4, we do not pre-approve a driveway permit in the location of the private easement agreement.
But it says approves the request for the vacation subject to the following conditions, which number 3 is property owner must record the executed private easement agreement ensuring continued access for PID 2619, 119, whatever, and provide the city of Corcoran with proof of recording. So we're attaching a private condition to a public road right-of-way, which I don't want to conflate the two, I guess, maybe would be the word. Like, I don't want that to be part of, they can do that on their own. I don't care if they do that. I'm fine with approving it without 3, but I would not be okay with approving it with 3, only because I don't want to ever have codification of a private agreement be part of the city's business. And it's a technical thought, but do we ever have to, do we as a city council have to vote to approve private easement agreements, period, ever? Like, that's not part of our role.
Not that I can think of off the top of my head, but I'd want to verify.
So I'd prefer not to have us be, I'd prefer to separate the powers of the council in a way that I'm not against that agreement, but I don't want this easement to be conditional upon that agreement.
I think by I'll make a motion to approve striking condition 3. And I think you came to the resolution by striking it of what you intended to do by voting against it. And
Say that again?
by striking 3, you were still vacating the property.
Yes.
They
Correct.
still have their easement, which people wanted tied into the original vacation back when we talked about it, but it's not listed in the public record as part of the resolution.
Correct.
So that's my motion.
I second that.
Sounds good. Any more discussion? And Jessica, go ahead.
I was gonna say, there is one whereas on the second to the last whereas that talks about, that discusses the private agreement as well. If you want to strike the private agreement from that back portion, we might want to strike.
Yeah,
that
so
whereas
I,
as well.
friendly amendment to include the whereas about the private easement.
I'll accept that.
Okay. Any discussion on that? Dean?
The only thing I'm thinking of, it's a private agreement. If one of those sell, move away, that private agreement is done and over, and the new owners, I mean, that's my only thing. I agree with everything that's said. I agree with the motion and stuff.
I would
There's
have,
an issue there related to a private agreement with 2 landowners, and my question is, should it be private? What issues are related to that private agreement? Is it any of our business? If our attorney was involved in it, there's got to be something there that says it needs to be noted and documented and recorded and such. The
agreement states that shall be binding upon the parties hereto, their personal representative heirs, and assigns. So they can reassign it to the buying party. We don't have anything to do with it.
Has the agreement been signed?
Okay.
Do we know?
A copy of the agreement was
There.
signed. Because we have not vacated the right-of-way, it makes it they'll have to re-sign the agreement.
okay.
So that we can work with the attorney, so yes, they'll have to re-sign the private agreement.
Okay.
I'm not hung up on the agreement being in the record or not in the record. The reason why I voted no last time was I wanted to make sure they had that resolved, and Mr. Galbraith's property would be accessible. If we, as a city, are satisfied that that has happened to a formal level, I am okay to vote for it. If we have not yet gotten to that, and there's still an opportunity where he may not have access to the street from his property, then I would vote no again.
I would assume that should be satisfied. We have a signed agreement by both parties and duly notarized.
They'll have to re-sign it, but assuming,
Why would they have to re-sign it?
because we haven't vacated the easement yet, so that's not, it's not, most of the contract is not valid because it hasn't happened yet, so they signed it, they shouldn't have
So
signed
they
it.
should have different language in their contract that,
They can litigate that if they want, I guess.
Yeah, I mean,
Hopefully, they'll just sign it.
hopefully they
Won't be a
just
problem.
sign it, right, exactly.
And I could be, Kendra is noting that I might have misspoken, that she thought that they would sign the one that they have in here as well as the new language.
The private agreement, I think, in reviewing the city attorney's email, is there's just an order that things need to happen. It's okay that that's already signed and dated in December. It's executed. It just is not recorded. So when they go to record this resolution, they will record the vacation and then the new easement that's being deeded, and then the easement between the two private parties. So John has an order and an email to staff, and I think he's chatted with Natalie, and we're kind of coming in late to the game. But I do not believe they need to re-sign that. It's just a matter of how things get recorded at the county. So in answer to the question, we have a fully executed agreement between those two private property owners. The Galbraiths can then take tonight's action, if it gets approved, record those at the county along with that private agreement.
Wonderful.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
Perfect, okay.
I move to approve.
Well, we have
Sorry,
a
David.
motion in a second. If there's nothing else, call the vote. No. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so that was to strike 3, right?
that was to
It was
Approve the whereas.
I'm comfortable with that if
That's
that's the
right.
case, so.
strike 3 and the
Gotcha.
whereas.
Everyone good on that?
Yes.
Sounds good. 8B, Urban Conservation Subdivision.
Kendra, go ahead.
Next slide. This was identified as a council priority in 2021 as the goal being to preserve our open space in the MUSA. And over the last year, we held 3 council work sessions. We held a joint meeting with the Planning Commission and Council. We held a developer roundtable, and then last month held a public hearing at the Planning Commission. There was no one present at the Planning Commission to speak to this item. The Planning Commission did discuss this at length and ultimately voted 3-1-1 to recommend denial of the ordinance as drafted. Next slide. Again, this was the natural resource inventory, but this applies in the yellow areas, the low-density residential areas. Next slide. This is what standard zoning gets us in Corcoran today. This slide reflects what somebody could do under our standard RSF2 zoning district. That's what the bulk of land in the low-density residential is zoned. And the next slide just talks about why we did this and some of the key elements. I think the one key point is it does require 25% of the gross land area to be preserved as open space. That's the pre-development gross acreage. And then it needs to be preserved in a conservation easement. It can be no more than 2 non-contiguous parcels. The land can be separated as drafted by a public street, but cannot be more than 2 of those non-contiguous parcels. The idea is to have that open space in a large piece, not like a skinny strip running around the perimeter of the site, for example. We did draft it with a 20-acre minimum lot size, and we did say, after some discussion, that park space could be used to meet park dedication under certain conditions and at the council's discretion. Next slide. So you guys know this, we've talked about it a lot, so I just quickly highlighted a couple things. And we have prepared resolutions for approval. Ordinance number 2022-48, amending both the subdivision and the zoning ordinance to allow this urban conservation option. Resolution 2022-07, approving findings of fact, and then summary ordinance 22-449 for summary publication. The first two items require a 3/5 vote. The summary publication requires a 4/5 vote. We did not prepare a resolution for denial, but the Planning Commission did vote to recommend denial of the ordinance amendment. If the council wishes to deny the request, they should direct staff to prepare findings of fact for action at the next council meeting.
Okay,
So you guys know this as well as I do, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
thank you. Any questions for Kendra or discussion? Lots of spinning wheels.
I think there was a lot of good discussion with the planning commission. I understand their point. The hardest thing for me to swallow is the really tiny lots. You know, we talk about what makes Corcoran unique. When you get outside, you get outside what's been developed in the last 5 years, it's larger lots. Homes further apart, more natural space that way. You're not right on top of your neighbors. And to me, this is really, it's the same density, but it feels more dense because you're more on top of your next door neighbor.
Gotcha.
So I think in that regard, we're getting away from the feel of what people want of having a rural character in the city of Corcoran. That's probably one of my hardest things to swallow on this.
Okay. Other thoughts?
I get, one of the things that I struggle with respect to this is that I feel like, and I think that if a developer wanted to do this, they already could do this. And so it codifies something that we want, I guess, but then it also codifies a bunch of stuff we don't want. And so I agree with the conversation from planning where it really reduces the flexibility in the council to, demand or get, not demand, I don't want to say it like that, but there's a give and take. So we come in here and the builders want something, and the landowners want something, and the town is left with whatever's done at the end, and those interests don't always align. And that's our job, is to sort of play referee with all that, and then what is the future, what do we want the future of Corcoran to look like? And I think that the council plays a critical role in being able to have different tools at the disposal. And this takes away from some of them in a pretty significant and profound way. And I think that this, if we sat and, because I saw some of the examples early, is we have these amazing communities with big open spaces and nice properties, and like that's idealistic, but builders don't always, and it's not, they what we think it will end as isn't always what it ends as.
Right.
As we found out countless amounts, or countless times, is that there's a squeeze that happens in certain areas of the town, and they want as many properties on as small a space as humanly possible. And Some would say that's not in the town's best interest. So we've had lots of conversations about how to make Corcoran less urban, and I don't know if this does it. I'm not sure.
Gotcha. Ian, you-
I'm still thinking.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
Jeremy, I saw you were taking some notes.
You saw my furious scribbling? Not angry, but fast.
You're always scribbling during city council. That's nothing new.
I try to keep track of what's going on. So I welcome the discussion, and I think this was an idea that I have been championing, and I continue to champion it, and I hear your concerns, and I think you're right about having those as factors we need to consider as we make the decision. And I think there are probably some modifications we could make to reduce those risks. I would say, speaking to the concern that the Planning Commission had, that it reduces our flexibility to guide the process. I would say that the PUD process that we follow now is more constraining and less effective. And the reason I say that is there's a lot of structural advantages that applicants have, and there's a lot of limitations that the city has. So as individual council members, we can't communicate outside of public meetings. So we can't really negotiate outside of meetings themselves. Meetings one-on-one with applicants are risky for a variety of reasons. One of them is that if we make conclusive statements, our vote gets taken away. So it's very difficult for us to negotiate. The applicants are in charge of the timeline. They're in charge of the economics of the model. We don't have visibility into what they would be able to do or not do. So we have to take their word for a lot of things. And so I feel like if the framework is we have to either choose PUD or something different to get closer to our goals, the PUD is never going to get us what we want because we don't have enough leverage in the PUD negotiation process. I agree that there are limitations that we would be buying into with the ordinance as it's modeled currently. And I think that there are some things we could do to address that and give the council a little bit more discretion. I'll talk about those in a second. Speaking specifically to Alan's concern about we want larger lots. That's kind of what most people think of as a rural feel. I agree. If we can get larger lots, I think that would be an excellent outcome. But I don't think we can achieve the comp plan densities that we're required to achieve based on what we did in 2018 and have larger lots. I mean, we can conceivably in some cases do 80-foot lots, but we haven't had any PUDs come through with 80-foot lots in them, and nobody's developed on the conventional by rights method to do that. If we wanted to do something like that, I would be open to other changes we could make to the code. Or maybe we just stop accepting PUDs that aren't 80-foot lots. I don't think we're going to get larger lots short of something like that. Speaking to John's concern, that we may not get what we expect, I agree, we might not get exactly what we're expecting. And maybe that means we need to find a way to make this a little bit more discretionary, or take some of the things that we're most concerned about and limit them just to the RSF3. So for example, the current ordinance draft, we're allowing twin homes in either RSF2 or 3. Maybe we just limit that to 3. And that limits what can be proposed, because as applications come through, they're going to be trying to get provisional zones converted into RSF2 or RSF3, the holding zones that we have. So we would have discretion as to whether we would allow it to go to 3 or to 2. So if there are things that we're concerned about, we could tie those just to the 3. And then with our discretion on the rezoning motions, we would be able to limit where some of those more intense uses could happen, for example. I also know that if we're not happy with the kinds of projects that we see, unless we change something, we're going to continue to get those. And we know we've gotten really strong feedback from residents with the Northeast District guidelines that they want to see natural spaces preserved, they want open space, they want high-value natural resource areas. And there's no guarantee that we're going to get any more of those in future developments than we've gotten in the past. So I think we need to change something. I'm very open to modifications to give us more flexibility in what we would accept or not accept. If there are specific concerns that we have, let's talk about how we would modify the draft ordinance to deal with that. But I feel like it would be a mistake to let this opportunity to adopt a change slip away entirely.
Well said. I have kind of a, building off of what you said, I had a thought I talked to Jessica about yesterday. What if, and I just want to float this out here, what if we were to amend the ordinance to just take effect in the RSF3? So we remove RSF2 entirely from it, which essentially, right now with what our zoning is, where our zoning map is, we don't have a lot, if really any available RSF3 land. So it would give the council kind of a lever as we're rezoning properties, you know, things going from urban reserve to a residential zoning district, to decide, okay, we're open to this possibly happening here, or if it's an area we think that this just is not something we want to even potentially see, we wouldn't rezone it to RSF3, we'd maybe look at an RSF2 and something like that. So it would cut back on the, well, current land area that it could happen in a lot, and it would more be a tool that could be used in the future, potentially, but not necessarily, retroactively effective to all that land.
So then the only area where it would be a complete, I don't want to say open forum, but anything that's urban reserve, the council can decide whether to rezone or not rezone to a zoning type that would allow this ordinance to be used. Is that a fair
Say
statement?
that again?
So the council would have discretion when somebody comes in with an application for a parcel that's currently urban reserve, and they want to do the conservation subdivision ordinance in that parcel. Would the council have the ability to say no? So if they came in and it's urban reserve now, they want to rezone it to RSF3, and they want to do something that we object to for some reason that we didn't anticipate, would the council be able to refuse to rezone at that time?
Maybe I'll defer to Kendra a bit, but it'd be the same kind of process as if someone was coming in saying, we want to do a PUD here, and, could the council
Yeah, that's my question.
say no to rezoning it to PUD, which I would say yes, generally.
The only difference, yes, you can say no to a rezoning. So how it would work is somebody would come in an urban reserve zoning district and ask to rezone to RSF3. They could also ask to rezone RSF2 to RSF3. The difference is with a rezoning to PUD, you are tying the rezoning to the land use plan or the site plan. You can't really do that with a policy decision of the rezoning to RSF3 in the same way. So you have a little less discretion, but since it's a rezoning, that's a legislative action, as you said, you have discretion. You really don't need to have a reason to deny that. The only thing I just want to caution you is it is a little tricky to say, I don't like your plat, because that's all this is, so I'm denying your rezoning. You really just need to say, I'm denying your rezoning. Just to be a little bit careful about that, but you absolutely have the most discretion almost in any action with that rezoning.
Gotcha. Thank you. So, thoughts on that aspect of it?
I think it preserves discretion that the planning commission was nervous to give up. So I feel like it's a positive move to make that modification.
Wait, say that again. Make what modification?
So the mayor proposed, instead of allowing the urban conservation subdivision ordinance to be used in either 2 or 3, you would limit it to only 3, because there aren't a lot of 3s currently zoned in the city. And then you get the discretion that we always have in rezoning for something that isn't already RSF3 to review before we would approve.
Would basically just cut the scope of what we're right now, as it's drafted, it's all RSF2 and RSF3. And we have a fair amount of RSF2 land, but not, I'm trying to think of where we have RSF3 right now.
There's very few.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
Directly across the street and down towards 10.
Yep.
There's directly south of the city park,
Yep, gotcha.
which is residential.
Yep.
And then here
Or
it's.
is that, RMF one?
Oh, sorry.
I don't believe we have any RSF.
Oh, we don't even have
Mayor.
any.
I don't know that we do.
Gotcha. Same point on it, that it's not something that right now would be,
No. That's manufacturing park.
You know, I think a good point came up in the planning commission, and you talked a little bit about it too, is that if it's a negotiation between council based on directives from council to staff with developers, I don't really remember having any discussions on what we were gonna direct council was gonna direct staff on if a PUD comes in, what's important to us.
We should do that.
I mean, I think that's the first point we should really be saying and say, you know what? We give you all this benefit for infrastructure, but your infrastructure really only benefits you, right? Sewer and water coming to Ravinia didn't benefit me at all, and I live a block away. And it never will. So what is it benefiting Mark or anybody else that lives outside of that area? So I think that's where we have to say, well, it's really not a benefit to the city and what you're giving in a PUD. And the point you made about 80-foot lots, I think when Ravinia came in, there was quite a few 75-foot lots in that mix. And every time they came back to us, that lot got smaller and smaller and smaller.
Yeah.
I think it really should come down to is, what does council want? Make sure staff is fully aware of what we want and what we'd give up. And then hold the developer to the fire and say, no, we've already made a decision on this. Don't come back to us anymore. So, I would love to have that point of, power in our pocket as a council and say, no, this really isn't a benefit to us in any way, shape, or form. And to the planning commission's point, I don't really want to limit that. I'd rather take a stronger stance up front and say, no, we will have all 75-foot lots in this development, or we will have 15-foot setbacks. We're not having 5-foot setbacks between your houses.
Mr. Mayor, I think I'm ready. Thank you, Councilman Schultz. When I started on the planning commission, everything came to the planning commission as a PUD. And I think Councilor Schultz said it right. Council, mayor, we need to direct staff that we already have ordinances related to all of these areas. R1 has ordinances, R2 has ordinance, R3 has ordinances. If we just stick to those guns, and those ordinances have been written in the past by some very, very knowledgeable and well-thought-out residents and people of the city, and I don't want to take that away. While I like Jeremy's time that he has spent on this and such, I still go back to our 700 and some page ordinance booklet on everything there, but everything came to the planning commission as a PUD. Everything was said to the planning commission back when I was there is you have to approve. You have to recommend approval and such. And it always felt in my gut that it was like, why are we here then? And I've seen an evolution in the past year or so that the planning commission has more input to some of these things to do, and it would really be nice if we do exactly what Councilmember Schultz mentioned, is direct staff to say we need to start following our current guidelines. R1, R2, R3, they all have ordinances related and guidelines and those kind of things, and we have to be able to say too, enough PUD unless it benefits us as a city. I don't want to give more, I don't want to put more ordinances in place when we aren't even using ordinances we're currently using, or we currently have. Am I saying all of this right?
Yeah. Makes sense.
It's just a bad gut feeling, and Councilman Schultz said it very, very well. R1, 75, 80, 85, whatever our setback or our lot size are, that's what they are. The setbacks are this, and everything has been given into go minimum lot size, minimum side yard, all of these things, and it just it's just turning all of our properties or everything that's coming in front of us into something that just doesn't look right or feel right. And it just, I don't like it. I'm going to use the most current concept plan, or the concept that was brought to us. The property on 101 in Hackamore, that 30 acres, that concept came to us extremely well thought out, in my mind, extremely well thought out related to setbacks, buffers, keeping the green space, keeping the trees, all those things. And that group still met the density for what that property was set aside for. So it's kind of a blend of the ordinance that's in front of us, but it's also, it protects the neighborhood to the north and west. It protects the neighbors or the people that are going to buy those homes from 101, because very limited disturbance of that buffer and those kind of things. I don't know how we can write that in an ordinance any better than that group coming to us and saying, we've listened to everyone, we've listened to all of these meetings. The
Bass Lake
Pulte-
Road?
No, Hackamore and 101.
Oh, okay, you said County 30 and 101.
Did I? I'm sorry.
And I'm wondering where.
I gotta
Okay.
throw something at me
Got
no
it.
sooner. That corner is extremely important to our city, and I think a good design concept and stuff is gonna come in front of us. We had a lot of good input to that, and I've heard very little resistance to what's going on, other than a number of people saying we don't want multiplex homes related. But if I sit and I think of that site, and if they've got to put in 117 single-family homes in that site, I don't want to see another clear cut in this city. I had one out in the absolutely rural countryside that my property butts up against. Makes me sick looking out and over, while it's farmland, yeah, I understand it's a right of the landowner, those kind of things. It just makes me sick of that. I'm still dwelling and arguing with myself about the clear cutting that happens south of us. I know it's preparing for our grandiose thoughts and those kind of things related to what we want to do as a city and stuff, but it's really up to the five of us and future five people sitting on this side of the bench to really make this city look good and make our residents proud of what we do. So I can't put my arms around accepting this when we've already got so many ordinances, plans, those kind of things, and we just undermine them all by just everything comes to us as a PUD, and then
Gotcha.
we seem more, I seem more handcuffed than I want to be.
Gotcha. Well, I think this is all really good discussion. It's looking like there's not going to be the votes to support, so I'm thinking, and
I'm not done.
right ahead.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
No problem.
So I'm
You
hearing,
have 5 minutes, and you're at 4:30 right at the minute.
I'm going to copy John
Giving you grief.
and say, I was elected, I get to talk.
Yeah, I didn't argue with you having more time.
I just wish the mayor would limit us. I knew I went way over 5 minutes.
It's not public comment when you're on the side of the desk.
Oh, it's not, all right.
So I'm hearing two different
Robert's
conversations happening.
Rules of Order
Definitely don't say that.
does have 10 minutes as the suggested,
You can have
but,
mine.
but we can,
we'll
I
let
would
him
give
sit
you, I would cede
Yield
my
the time.
time
Go
to
get it.
your.
I'm sorry I brought it up.
So I'm seeing two different threads of conversation happening. And I think there's a broad thread of dissatisfaction with how the PUD has been used and how we as a city have been ineffective by not communicating to staff what we want, and therefore staff isn't able to negotiate for the things that we as a council values. I feel like that is something that we can address in parallel. We can do anything that we would like as a unit in terms of giving guidance to staff. Maybe we want to call a work session to do that and brainstorm what we should be looking for in these things. I think another thread would be, are there structural things we want to do within the PUD ordinance itself? Do we want to change where we allow PUDs to be done? Maybe we limit that in some way. And I'm very open to having conversations about that too. But I also want to acknowledge the other thread, which is more geared toward, this proposal. I sat through a league training last week, which I thought was very pertinent. And they talked through your comprehensive plan is where you're establishing the vision for how you want your city to be as it grows. And that's the base level of your pyramid. The next layer on the pyramid is your code of ordinances. That's where you codify structures that will make sure that you develop in accordance to your plan. What we have is a PUD process that hasn't matched the comprehensive plan to what we intend, so we're getting things that we're not happy with. I think relying on PUD to get what we want is a weak strategy, for all the reasons I laid out before, where the PUD is not geared for cities to have a lot of power, given how we can and cannot communicate with each other and with the applicants. So I feel like we would be remiss if we don't make changes so that the code does reflect what we want in the comp plan. And that could be, individual ordinances for the zones. We can certainly do that. I feel like adopting something like the proposal that we have doesn't prevent us from getting harder on PUDs and asking for what we want when PUDs are used. And if we preserve the ability to not rezone, to prevent this from being used if it gets perverted in some way, I feel like it's still worth implementing. Because it does do things that the PUD ordinance probably won't. I mean, if we require 80-foot lots always, that doesn't eliminate the clear-cutting problem. That doesn't preserve the open space that we want to preserve in the comp plan as high-value areas. This would do that if it was ever used. So I don't see a harm to the city in achieving its vision to go ahead and create this code change, because we would still retain discretion if it's going to be used in a way that we don't anticipate.
Well said. So,
Can I ask a question of staff? So, if this requires 25% land set aside, right? What's to stop a developer from splitting up their development and coming in with two separate development plans? Let's say, for example, you've got a large chunk of land. It's got a big piece on it that has some upland on it, but it's not conducive for them to really build on it the way they want to build. They group that with another portion of land so they can get their smaller homes in there. They can cram more homes into that area. And then the other portion of land, they can just come back with another PUD and build it however they want. Versus building, if they had it as one, they wouldn't meet the 25% requirement, and they'd have to be forced to build all of the bigger size, or else ask council for just variance on the smaller size. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
I'm not sure I was quite following. So if I have a 40-acre parcel, I split it into 20, and I do something on the first 20 as this OS or urban conservation development,
Well, looking at,
and then,
I hate using real-life examples, but we have a development, right, in the city, where they dedicated a large portion of land to park. One could say it was worthless land anyway, because A, it was in a school district that was undesirable to the rest of the development. B, it wasn't conducive to even build homes on it, the way it was laid out. So they used it for park dedication. Couldn't they use it in the same manner as this? And this is where the hypothetical comes in, because that didn't have very much upland. But they could basically take and split that overall development down and build one development with smaller lots, homes in it, and another development right next to it with normal size homes. You know what I mean?
I think what you're saying.
I don't know, maybe I should have had the coffee. I'm not completely sure I'm following, but as long as they comply with the ordinance, whether it's this or the R2, yeah, they'd have to split the land into two parcels. If you have 40 acres, when you come in to plat it, you have to plat the whole 40 acres. You have to give us a plat for that. So if they had 40 acres and said, I want to do an OS&P plat, then immediately the 10 upland acres need to go into a conservation easement, and then you would have 30 acres under this to get your 120
I think
homes.
what Alan, correct me if I'm wrong, I think what Alan's saying is what would stop, so let's say there's a 40-acre parcel, and they decide to do 20 acres as one development, urban conservation, so they're only dedicating 5 acres. And then the other 20 acres, they do a PUD on and do whatever that's negotiated to do, so we're actually only getting 5 acres instead of the 25% of that 40 acres.
Well, my thought is that they came in with a PUD, right, on a whole parcel. Let's say they got 260 acres. They take one and make it a 160 acre parcel, 40 acres of that, or 25%, falls into this conservation reserve. So they're left with 120 acres that, by right, they can build 45-foot lots, 5 feet apart. The other 100 acres, they're probably gonna come in with something bigger, because knowing the appetite of council does not like smaller lot sizes. But had they had it as one, they probably wouldn't get the same treatment, right? Because they would need it more than 40 acres to meet the 25%.
I don't think what would prohibit that is if it was a single parcel, they'd have to come in with a plat for the whole property. But if it was a landowner that owned multiple parcels and a developer said, I'm only gonna buy this 160 acres, and I'm gonna do it as an urban conservation easement, they could do that and give that smaller part, and then come in later and develop the other 100 acres as a standard RSF2 subdivision. There's nothing that would prohibit that. And why wouldn't we want them to do that? You want RSF2 and you want open space. So I'm not quite sure.
I think what I was thinking of is by having this in place, does it limit us? It limits our ability if they go down that path and meet the 25% minimum requirement.
100%, you're right. If they come in and comply with the code, you do not have discretion on the plat. But at least under this new proposal, you might have some rezoning discretion. If the recommendation to only allow it in RSF3, you'd have a policy question is, are we willing to zone this property from urban reserve, for example, to RSF3? And you could say yes or no. And there's no reason, right? It's high-level discretion. So if you know they're coming in and going to do this, you again, can't deny the rezoning because you don't like the project as part of the findings, but, you could look at it and say, yeah, I don't want to rezone it.
But once you rezone something, it's not as if you can just, once you rezone something, then a different project comes in, it's not as if you can just take that back.
No.
Yeah, so it almost becomes a project by, you can't say it's by project, but once the genie's out of the bottle, you can't stuff it back in once. You
Right.
can, but it's not that easy.
Yeah, well, if you rezoned a parcel of land to R3, you now have, if this were adopted, you would then have three options with that, right? They come in with this urban conservation district in R3, they come in with a standard R3 zoning district, or they come in and ask you for a PUD. And what we've always said to Planning Commission and Council is when that PUD comes in, you have a lot of discretion. Not no discretion, a lot of discretion. And I think, there's certainly some discussion that can be had about what those PUD priorities are. But if you rezone it, you still have options moving forward.
I like, Jeremy, feel like we're piling on you. If there's a way, there are some city councils in the metro. I'm gonna pick on the mayor of Woodbury. She ran and wanted to be governor last cycle, and she bragged that she was such a good mayor that the population of Woodbury doubled during her mayoral term. And it was kind of comical to me, because like a dog could have been the mayor of Woodbury while it was expanding. And
I mean, that's not why people are moving into Corcoran.
yeah, I'm looking right at you. Don't you dare take any credit for this. What we had in the electoral process is there seemed to be like a race to get as many people in Corcoran. It was like rooftops mattered. And there are people that were like, hold the phone, rooftops aren't that important. It's got to be done the right way. So you can see that people who ran on the right kind of development and taking some time and consideration as to what this town is going to look like in the next 10 years, like that idea won. And so the PUD process, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and I in here, we as a council need to, those things are important, and I think we need to have the actions in the PUDs reflect those. And so, I mean, we are at the time where I think we need to hold people's feet to the fire, and if we don't get what we are in a financial position as a town that's positive. We're in a position in the town where we haven't expanded the pipes and put in expanded sewer systems into the country and prayed that people come and move to our town, or we're gonna have to just accept whatever wants to come here to pay for the infrastructure. So there's been a gradual process, and we have flexibility as a town. We've put ourselves in position. The ideas that were about taking our time and reflecting on development won the last election. And so I think that process is winning. And I keep asking for silos and barns and development. And we don't have to have silos and barns, but we should have some standard that we all can talk about in open in a council meeting and get some stuff that we want. We don't have to just accept what's brought before us, especially when we have a PUD process that we've used. We had a project 4 years ago out in, it was not in Musa, but we had codified that if a person, it was in the rights, so if a person had, it was 120 acres, if they did this, if they automatically had 12 building rights, if they did this, they got 24 building rights, if they did this, they got 36 building rights, and like, all of a sudden, you got 36 homes crammed into this place in the country, and it didn't have to go PUD. And thank God the project fell apart. But we were tied to that project because although well thought out at the time, the builder used the code to do what they wanted to do, and the city couldn't do anything about it. And so, like, I agree with these concepts. I don't think we'll get what we want by it. That's the problem for me, is we're not gonna get what we want. We're gonna get something else that the builder wants, and it's not always the same. So I like your ideas, and I like these objectives and definitions. We have to hold people accountable in a different way, I think, than by code. That's my opinion, even though I like your ideas. And some of the neighborhoods that we had as reading material were awesome. I hope we get those.
Gotcha.
So, John, do you feel that the zoning discretion isn't sufficient protection?
No, I don't. I like the PUD process because I feel like we can hold people accountable for, there's competing interests, and the town has a competing interest in all this, and I don't think, absent the PUD, I don't think that the town gets as big of a voice. And you're saying the opposite, where you think that the PUD doesn't give the town the voice, and maybe we're not using it effectively.
I think either way, and we're gonna have this discussion a little bit at the end of the meeting here with our priorities. I think PUD is something we need to be taking a look at here soon.
Yep.
How our PUD ordinance in general and how we handle PUDs.
So we have code now that people could submit 500 home developments under. Are we uncomfortable with that?
That's another discussion, and we're not getting what we want with those either. But I think that how many of our developments have went in with PUD? I think all of them.
Right, none of them would have went without it.
So in a race to get rooftops, you don't negotiate that hard.
Is that what happened? Did we not try? I mean,
I feel like I don't know if we tried hard enough.
part of the challenge that I see is because we can't say, I'm going to vote no on this without it becoming a risk of it being an arbitrary and capricious decision, it's very hard to negotiate within the rules that we have. And that's part of the structural problem that I see with trusting the PUD process.
I think where that comes back to, we have to clearly define to staff what we're willing to give up as consideration of a benefit, what a benefit is. Because it's always said, well, this is what the city's benefiting from this. And in sewer and water, maybe a benefit that they're putting the infrastructure in or putting the streets in. But they ain't gonna sell a home if there's not sewer and water and a street to it.
Mm-hmm.
So whose benefit is it?
I totally agree with that sentiment. And I guess my struggle is, and this came up in Planning Commission too when they were debating it. I think Brad liked to semi-joke that in his term as city administrator, there were 17 council members.
I don't think it was a joke.
It was not.
No joke.
I've been here for 6 years, and there have been 12 different council members I've worked with. So I think that plays into the whole PUD and what priorities
Right.
are as we've negotiated those in the past.
So even if you've got a strong list, it's not really durable in the way that code would be. And I think that's why it's important to remember what the league says, that your code should be your primary vehicle for implementing your comp plan.
But what if the next people run on getting, you have to be clear with what you're running on, too. The next people run with, we want to build a lot of houses here, then the code and what happens will be a reflection of the voter. We all might think that these are wonderful priorities, and if we run on what we think and all of a sudden 5 new people are on the council, then they didn't like our ideas. They were bad, apparently. So there's a little bit of like, maybe if our ideas are bad, we won't win elections. And then that new council's priority will be reflected in the PUD process. As much as I think that would be a stupid decision for the voters to get rid of the five of us that, you know.
Well, I will say that in the hundreds of conversations I had where I brought up this idea, I had one negative response, and it was that they didn't believe we would do it. So the idea of trying to preserve open space within the code, on its face, I know to be popular. From the Northeast District guideline feedback we've gotten, lots of people prioritized all the images that showed, wetlands and forests and open spaces and.
But yet they bought homes that are 5, 10 feet apart. I just, that's what's driving me absolutely nuts. We've got people telling us they want more open space, but yet they can open a window and shake hands with their neighbor. I probably shouldn't say it like that, but I did, so can't take it back. I think Mayor McGee brought it up. I think our discussion here down our agenda, we've got a whole lot
Yep.
that we want to make changes, or we want to look at our core strategies and revisit some of this stuff. I think our PUD ordinance needs some changes.
Definitely.
And if we can incorporate a lot of these
Yeah.
ideas into it, I think that might make a little bit more sense without tying our hands.
Yep. Oh, I agree. It sounds like there's not going to be the votes for it, so I think we should direct staff to,
Should we table it until after the PUD discussion and then revisit if we want to?
I mean, I guess it kind of is by default being tabled.
We can vote
We don't have a
no
resolution
can't-
to.
and be done with it.
We don't have the resolution denying, of denial, so we just have to come back with finding of facts for that. Or we certainly could
I mean,
table it.
directing you to draft that
Draft
kind of
that.
is tabling it till
Till
that
the
meeting.
next
'cause-
meeting, it'd be
But-
the February 24th.
But you don't have to, if I bring up a law or an idea and if I say I want a, dead end trail haven at my culvert,
Ain't gonna happen.
we don't have to vote for deny, we just don't have to vote to accept it. If there's not somebody who puts forward that, if I make a motion and somebody doesn't second it, it's a dead issue. You don't have to deny something.
Well, to Councilmember Nichols' point, we can vote no on this, and you can bring it back up after the PUD. It doesn't mean that, voting no doesn't mean it never has to come back in front of us. So you accomplish the same thing by tabling it. Tabling only, that does is just leaves it open on the docket, but these documents are here, so just make a motion at a future meeting after we've had PUD discussions, if we want to bring it back up again.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
I think I would just, John's not here, but I think if you actually vote to deny this, to bring it back needs to come back through the public hearing process. So if you think there's still discussion, it might make sense just to table the discussion. There's no 60-day rule, it's your ordinance. But I think if you actually vote to deny it, I think Councilmember Bottom is right, you probably don't have to do findings of fact on a city-initiated ordinance, but that if you do deny it, it's dead. And now to bring it back, it has to go through the public hearing process again.
Gotcha.
I'll move to table.
Okay. Do we have?
I would second that with staff to draft the denial verbiage
Then you
at our
have to
next
motion.
meeting. Okay, never mind.
That-
I'll shut up. I didn't say
That
that.
motion dies,
Strike that.
unless we have a second for Jeremy's motion. But not Dean. Dean's motion was separate, if I'm understanding that correctly. Okay.
My thought is that if it comes back in front of us, we'll probably have changes to it anyway, so we would probably have another public hearing, no matter what. So I see the public hearing part as a moot point.
Gotcha.
So why don't we,
Did you want to make a motion?
My thought on what I was trying to say was come back with the recommended, the motion to approve and the motion to deny, and we have 2 weeks to think
Right.
about it even more.
Yeah, because if something.
Don't know if it would change your mind.
Something were to change in theory, that we're not tied just because it's being drafted.
Yeah.
Until that vote, so the,
I'm not, I don't think, is that tabling it, but bringing back the two motions?
it's essentially tabling it.
It's essentially
Regardless of what we wanna call
tabling it
it.
to the February 24th meeting, or a future meeting once it's drafted. So,
Did you want to make the?
What do you want me to say?
Did you want to make that motion?
I think you've made a motion, there's not a second at the moment. So my understanding is you have a motion on the table, and if it will not move forward unless there's a second on that.
Do we have a second?
So the motion to
Is to,
carry it on to the next meeting with
with approval and denial.
approval and denial writing.
Resolutions, a resolution of both.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, any further discussion?
yeah, I don't, unless there are going to be changes in this in the next 2 weeks, why would we have it on the agenda again?
I think just so we'd have the,
Then we would have the formal language to denial with the findings of fact.
We don't need a
But
findings of fact.
As you mentioned, John, it's certainly, it's up to the council, so it's really.
I wouldn't deny-
There's a motion on the table, so
Okay.
that's,
So I would say, unless they're going to be, it's not to be,
I'm making that motion because we're gonna be talking about ordinances and those kinds of things in the next, or in our agenda later. So I'm leaving the doors open, and it gives us that added information after we have
Yeah,
that
nothing
conversation
changes,
later
we just
today.
vote
To make the final decision next week, or in 2 weeks, with both recommendation, or both written resolutions. Approve and deny.
But I think John's point, that in that 2-week period, all we're gonna do later tonight is say, let's put it on our priority list.
Yeah,
We're not gonna find a
true.
resolution to it. So,
so we have the motion in the second, discussion, so all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
And does that everyone?
and, Jean, you would, nay?
Okay.
Yeah.
So that,
I'll make a motion to deny.
second.
okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay.
Stain.
Okay,
Thank you.
perfect. Got through it.
That
It was
was
really good
confusing.
discussion, guys. We appreciate it. Okay. 8C, Tavera Third Edition Final Plat and Final PUD Plan.
And, I'll have Kendra go ahead and do this, and we do have the applicant on, joining us virtually.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Tavera Third is the townhome, generally townhome portion on the corner of Hackamore and 101. Next slide. This, as you know, is a mix of single-family twin homes and townhomes. This particular phase has single-family and townhomes. Next slide. The image shows in the south Hackamore, and the single-family homes coming up on coming up on the north-south street, and then the townhomes on the east side of the project. Next slide. 9 single-family homes and 134 townhomes. These are all of the townhomes in Tavera. The townhomes will have their own HOA that will own and maintain the buildings, common space, and private drives. And the PUD approvals included specific standards that are being met in this proposal. Some PUD flexibility from those design standards was granted as part of the preliminary approvals. Next slide. There is a PUD amendment as part of this request, and the private drives are the blue areas. Those are the private drives that serve the townhomes. The preliminary approvals are based on our city code. Our city code was cribbed from the City of Plymouth code for our rural section of the city. And at the time we adopted the private drive standards in the rural district, we said, in the future, we're going to have to adopt standards for the townhomes, which will come in the future. We did not do that by code, but we used those same Plymouth standards as part of the approval for Tavera. They are now asking to modify two of those conditions. The first is to remove the requirement for the 20-foot concrete apron at the entrance to the private drive. That concrete apron was intended along with the narrower private drive width and the private drive signs to distinguish those private drives from public streets. And the code also said private drives are not allowed in outlots. All of those things were tools that the city adopted to ensure that homeowners associations don't let these private drives go tax forfeit and come back to us, or homeowners associations ask why we aren't taking care of these streets when it's time to do the overlays in the future. So they're really intended to protect the city. They are requesting to remove that apron requirement and put in a concrete valley gutter, and they are requesting to remove the prohibition of the private drives in the outlots. I've discussed that with the city attorney. He has no concerns, given that we've got protections in our agreements. And so the draft resolution in front of you, the modification from the one in your packet, really is to not only modify condition number C, which would allow a 3-foot concrete apron instead of a 20-foot concrete apron, and then eliminated item F, which in the original approval said those private drives could not be in outlots. Next slide. The townhome resolution also in condition 3 notes that I had an error in the original resolution regarding the stone elevations. I was using a walkout elevation when I was calculating the side stone percentage, even though the plans included both walkouts, slab on grade, and lookout elevations. I just picked the wrong house plan when I put that percentage in there, so that corrects that condition to note the range of stone and brick on the side and front of the different elevations. Next slide. I just wanted to note, since you've had a lot of conversation, this is the area where the three newest stockpiles are. You did approve those stockpile locations. They will remain until the property to the west develops. So single-family lots are being platted in the third edition, but they won't actually be built until the property to the west develops and that dirt is moved to plat those parcels to the west. Next slide. I think one of the big discussions tonight is the development, or the Welcome to Corcoran sign. The development, one of the PUD benefits that was part of Tavera was a monument sign at 101 in Hackamore. And the intent was not a development sign for Tavera, but this is a Corcoran gateway sign. And the benefit was Lennar would design and build that sign for the city. And as I said in the staff report, if the council, we've heard different things about gateway signs. If the council does choose to proceed with the gateway sign, now would be the time to spend some time thinking about what that should look like so that we could replicate it in other portions of the city. Maybe in the Northeast District, that might be something that comes in. And so we'd like some direction. This concept is stone pillars with fencing, wood fencing. It's kind of a rural look. It was an attempt at a rural look, no silo, an attempt at a rural look, and the sign says, welcome to Corcoran. It doesn't have dimensions on it, but.
Concrete
just
posts
some
with,
stone rail.
with rails.
Thank
Stone
you,
rail
rails.
posts with rails, wood
Split
rails.
rail, that's what I was looking for.
Danny, how's that fit for you? I'm sorry.
Just the brain freeze.
Sorry.
Even better.
So, Jess, next slide. This was the approved preliminary plat. Again, you're familiar with that. Next slide. This is the final plat for this third edition with the townhomes and the 9 single-family homes. Next slide. And so generally, this is the newest phasing plan from them. This is the third phase. Their plan at this point is the fourth edition will come in on the north side of Gleason Parkway Horseshoe Trail, the main entrance to the site. And then we're working with them. That certainly requires some major infrastructure improvements, but that would be the next phase. Next slide. Generally, again, with a couple of modifications I noted in the resolution, this is consistent with the original approvals. We do recommend approval of Resolution 2022-03 and 2022-04, approving the PUD final development plan and final plat and development contract. I did mention those changes to condition number 4 in the item on your packet, and we are really looking for direction on that Corcoran Gateway sign that's proposed.
Perfect, thank you. Any questions that stand up for Kendra?
I have a couple questions, but they're not related to the approval of the final. One, I thought, didn't at one time, wasn't there a proposed city park in that phase 4? In the, the kind of the corner that juts out? Down where that trail goes through?
Yes, that is a city park, just north of that, actually.
Yeah.
On the north side of Horseshoe, that is a city park.
It's just a natural park? There's no,
I think it's intended to be a neighborhood park, actually.
Okay.
With some improvements, so we don't know what that might be, but, typical playground type stuff. I think it's about 4.5, 5 acres, if I
yeah,
remember.
okay. It didn't look like it the way they have it drawn there.
I think that trail where they've got the trail winding through might be part of it. That kind of looks like it divides it a bit, too.
Okay, and then my other question, as I said, not related to the final draft because it's already been approved in the preliminary, but the 60, is it 62nd place, the public street in the townhome area? Was there any concern with Public Works when that came through that that's the only access out of that development? If there's a fire in that first townhome unit, there's no way to vacate that whole neighborhood.
Public safety did review this, and that was not a concern, a condition for public safety. I think for Public Works, they're fine with the single.
I think it was guided by the county's access. I think there is a trail connection eventually to 116. I don't know if I don't think it was required to be a full emergency access, but something that, might provide some assistance.
I mean, it's just odd that there's that many dwellings in that area and there's only one access point. And if we're gonna have a trail, why didn't we require an emergency access trail? I mean, when Ravinia was put in to the north of our neighborhood, the trail connection required an emergency access route, and there's only 36 residential homes in my neighborhood. So I just find it a little odd. I know it's nothing we can act on now, but I think something we should have looked at closer when we were looking at the preliminary approvals. With regard to what's actually in front of us, so can you give us a better picture of what valley gutters look like, and what will the gutters on the public street what is the curb gonna look like on 62nd Place on the public road? Is it gonna actually be a raised curb, or is it gonna be a valley-style curb as well?
You're correct. A valley gutter is just a little different orientation of a surmountable curb.
Right.
So, I mean, it's probably going to vary a little bit in different spaces because drainage plays a little bit. I think the 3 foot, that's the minimum width for visualization that we look at. There, whether it's high back, whether it's surmountable, or whether it's just like a V valley gutter, it could be any combination of that. But we just wanted that visual delineator so it just wasn't pavement wrapping from the public road right into the private drive.
So will it be used to move stormwater along the street?
It can in certain cases. This doesn't necessarily need that.
Okay.
So in some instances, if the grades are too flat, we would require it. This is strictly a delineation between the private drive and the road.
So is the valley gutter actually part of the private drive, or if there's maintenance on it, does it become public works issue because it's along 62nd?
This is written that it would be part of the private drive.
Okay.
So we would stop up to that. There's always a match point. And to be honest, in like a reconstruct, even in a residential neighborhood, you know, if there's a line, we make a decision at that point how we match it appropriately. But the valley gutter would be technically owned by the private drive.
Okay, so if there's any damage to it, it's their responsibility to replace it.
If it's failing or blown out, we would send them a notice if they fix it, more or less, and we'd go through that route with the HOA.
Okay, thank you.
Important.
I would say, let's try to learn from this experience. Would anybody vote for this PUD if it was coming afresh?
Probably not.
I don't
So
think,
what don't you like about it? Let's give staff some guidance as to what we like and don't like.
I don't really care for all the townhomes on the corner, to be honest with you, but that was what we were presented to meet the density of the thing, of the project.
Welcome to Corcoran. That sign's got to be big to hide all of these.
that'll be two prominent corners with townhouses.
Yeah.
What valuable thing did we think we got at the time?
That's another good question. I couldn't answer that to this day.
Huge piles of sand.
Like,
Bigger than we asked for, actually, yes.
Yeah.
So, and
that's another concern that you brought up. We got 3 big piles circulating around that one intersection.
Those will go away. I think the point is well taken as to flexing your muscles sometimes on these projects.
one lesson that I would learn is that even if you negotiate a deal you're happy with in the beginning, that doesn't mean you're not going to be asked to change the deal after the fact as well, because we get a lot of requests for changes.
You know, kind of to my point before, when I was talking about if they came in with if you came in with a project not as a whole, but in parts, right, would this have looked totally different? If it wouldn't have included that parcel of land to the west that was mostly swamp, would there be a need to have townhomes to meet the density because there's more buildable acres in that area? It's like the addition of that land forced the hand to create higher density in this area. I mean, there probably could have been a better way of dealing with that, but then you're infringing upon a private landowner's ability to sell and a private purchaser's willing to buy, I guess. And that's where the balance comes in, where it becomes hard, right? Because we're up here as a council and people think we're attracting developers to the city. We're not. We're not out soliciting developers. We're not out soliciting businesses. They come to us with proposals and we have to work with the best we can through our ordinances and what our desires are. But yeah, had I had a choice again, this probably wouldn't have been a vote I would have voted for.
There is an opportunity to codify, and it's actually our top priority, is buffer zones. And one of the things I think that is important about rural feel is, the rural feel is from outsiders. When you can design a neighborhood where it looks like more rural from the outside, but we don't have to have the inside of developments look rural. Because if you don't want to live there, you don't have to live there. You don't have to buy one of these townhouses, I guess, if you don't want to, but I think we can codify the impact to the road. In this case, we probably could.
Go ahead.
Well, so whatever, that's a lesson that maybe we can apply to.
I think this is all really good conversation. Applying it specifically to the one item that's being asked here with the curb, you mentioned, a change coming in, if we're in favor of that or not. Specifically with this curb, what are we thinking?
I don't see any advantage to the city to the change that's requested. And if the purpose of the PUD is to negotiate benefits for the city, I don't see one here. maybe I'm missing something.
Well,
Seems more like a concession.
yeah, but I think this is an oddity in that the request for the what do you call it, the addition, or the entrance to the private drive, the concrete pad, that came out of discussion years ago. You guys had talked about paving private drives and having, not tracking sand onto public roads from private drives. If memory serves me right.
Yes.
Right, so we don't have a private drive ordinance in our urban area. When we looked at them for the rural area, we brought the City of Plymouth's ordinance. The City of Plymouth requires this concrete apron in all townhomes in the City of Plymouth. We just brought that over. There wasn't a lot of discussion about that. In the rural area, just for council's knowledge, we have a 75-foot apron that's required when you're, how does it go? Going from gravel to a paved road. So that's how that came about after some discussion with the council, so.
Do we all agree that we want, well, the other thing is the monuments. Do we want a monument, an entry point?
I had sent some images to staff. I don't know if you guys have those available. I would not have negotiated for a monument, but since it's part of what we negotiated for, I wouldn't pass it up. And I think we should pick something that's at least as high in design value as Lennar's own monuments for their neighborhoods. I wouldn't want to see just a rail fence with our name on the rail, as was pictured in the graphic.
Yeah, I think I would agree. I don't know.
So you wouldn't vote for, you wouldn't
If this were coming in again, I wouldn't see a Corcoran sign as a benefit.
We don't have to have one.
But again, this was negotiated for 2 years ago.
Well, I think it
It's
was
something that
more of an
we
offer.
saw as valuable.
Yeah.
I wouldn't pass up the one thing that we're getting that,
Well, yeah, I don't know if it was a big negotiating point, but
But since,
the bigger question is, do you want a sign that says the Corcoran? Aside of how it got there, we can just say we don't want one.
good. I think it could be done well.
I think if it is, I'd be in favor of it if it's
Yeah.
done well too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess for me, it would depend on what it looks like. I could take it or leave it, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I mean,
I would
to your
vote-
point, if it was considered a benefit, I'd trade equal value in trees for it and have them plant more trees.
Yeah. In terms of getting maybe more specific into the design, I mean, is that something we should do at a work session? Should we, I mean, how much direction do they
Yeah.
want, or do we want to give, or do they need?
Yeah, I think we could look at a work session. I'm just trying to figure out where, we just have to, I think it's about timing of when that sign would need to be formalized. We have our next couple work sessions scheduled, but if we would have some time in mid in the next few months. So I think it's more a question of timing on how quickly Kendra, your team would need that.
Yeah, no, the approval says they have to build it and that they're going to work with the city to design it. I wouldn't want to wait a year to get onto it by any means, but I think you certainly could take the time and we could find those examples. I thought those were some good examples. I think the new Dayton sign is an interesting example. I don't know if I like it at the interchange. It's a big sign. I don't know if you've been up to the new interchange. They have a welcome to Dayton sign that's very attractive, but very big.
It's on the bridge too, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My biggest issue about the sign is I'd rather it be on the northbound side than looking across traffic and across the area, if that makes sense.
Northbound side of the.
I'd rather it be on the east side, the northeast corner of Hackamore and 116 than looking across to look at it, but that's just me in old driving ways, so
The northeast
I'd rather see
corner's
more
not
trees there.
on their prop.
It's not their
Okay,
property.
Gotcha.
So
I see what you're saying. Okay, yeah.
I just,
It would be nice. But okay, so maybe that's kind of direction we are interested. We'll set up a work session at some point to maybe hammer that down, and in the interim, if anyone and Jeremy, you said you sent in some examples. If anyone
Yes.
sees signs they like or just design choices they like, silos they like, send them in to Jessica and Kendra, and maybe that can kind of.
Maybe they could build an arch over the.
How about a bridge? Can we do a bridge?
There you
This
go.
is-
Hey, that's